It is the deadliest conflict in the world. As many as 500,000 people have died in Ethiopia in a brutal civil war between the federal government and the northern province of Tigray, which leaders used to run the country. Yesterday, the two sides signed a truce, but as Nick Schifrin reports, enormous challenges lie ahead.
They have aimed their guns at each other for exactly 2 years, but yesterday they promised to silence the guns permanently. Ethiopia's federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front signed a truce that requires Tigrayan forces to disarm and recognize federal government control. Ethiopia agreed to halt its military offensive and, quote, further enhance its collaboration with humanitarian agencies to continue expediting aid. Former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo led the negotiations.
This moment is not the end of peace process, but the beginning of it.
Relief can't come soon enough to Tigray. More than 5 million need urgent food aid. The World Health Organization calls Tigray the worst humanitarian crisis in the world.
We are not able to treat our patients. We are seeing patients dying.
Dr. Fasik Amdislasi is a surgeon at Eider, Tigray's only functioning hospital. He hasn't received antibiotics for 1.5 years. There hasn't been insulin or dialysis for 3 months.
Almost every kind of medicine that's required for treatment of patients has not come to the hospital.
Desperate patients line up only to be told there's no treatment.
We are no longer professionals who treat patients, but we tell bad news. The bad news is you have this illness, but we are sorry we cannot treat you.
International humanitarian organizations have accused Ethiopian forces and their Eritrean allies of widespread atrocities and gender-based violence. The crisis began in November 2020. Tigrayan forces who used to run the country attacked a federal outpost. Pre-deployed, federal forces and their allies from neighboring Eritrea and the Amhara region waged a scorched earth campaign and occupied parts of Tigray. In June 2021, Tigrayan forces pushed most federal Ethiopian soldiers out, but the government launched a siege. Ethiopia blocked humanitarian aid from entering Tigray and even detained truck drivers. This past March, the sides signed an initial ceasefire, but in August, Ethiopia relaunched its campaign into Tigray and seized key cities. The campaign reduced parts of Tigray to rubble. An Ethiopian government airstrike even hit this kindergarten, killing several children. And that is the combat that Ethiopia now promises to end. To discuss this more, we're joined by Filsan Ahmed, the former Ethiopian Minister for Women, Children, and Youth. She was the youngest minister in President Abiy Ahmed's cabinet, but resigned last year in protest. Filsan Ahmed, thank you very much. Welcome to the News Hour. How significant do you believe is this truce?
I think it's very important that we finally reached to this moment, and it's going to be very important for the country, especially for the northern parts of Ethiopia, which will bring a 2-year conflict into an end.
Some of the concerns about this truce that have been raised by analysts, it doesn't include Eritrea, Ethiopia's ally to the north. It doesn't include Amhara, Ethiopian ally in eastern Ethiopia. Could those be spoilers going forward and actually trying to make a durable ceasefire?
From what we've seen from the agreement, it is focusing in the internal, which is this conflict is between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray regional government. And it was a conflict that started in the intention of a quick, decisive blitzkrieg. However, it was not successful. And I believe that's why we had the involvement of Eritreans. On my view, is first, we as Ethiopians, let's discuss what we have difference in more of a round table, and then we can come back to external factors.
Not only was Ethiopia's blitzkrieg, as you called it, of Tigray unsuccessful, but Ethiopia launched a humanitarian crisis in Tigray, according to officials who I speak with. More Tigrayans died from that humanitarian crisis than died from any of the combat. And humanitarian groups tell me there was a deliberate campaign to withhold aid from Tigray. As we reported, this agreement does not force the Ethiopian government to allow aid into Tigray. Does that concern remain today?
There was a siege for more than 2 years now, and I think both sides are blaming each other, but I would definitely call out for the government as the buck stops the government's front. They are the federal government and they should be putting people over politics. I believe the Ethiopian government has a role to play in this as a federal government, and they should absolutely take this peace deal in a way that they can find a way to heal the people of Tigray.
You became minister in March 2020 and resigned a year and a half later because, as you put it, the government's failure to bring perpetrators of war crimes, including mass rape, to account. What did you and your ministry find?
And we set up a task force to go on the ground to find what has been happening in the region after the government took over Tigray. We found a lot of atrocities took place, especially by the government and Eritreans and militia as well. And that's, of course, not to say that TPLF, interestingly, it took the Amhara and Afar region have not committed any crimes. But as a minister, at the time I was serving, we focused on Tigray because that's where main of the conflict was taking place. And what we found was absolutely horrendous. And I mean, it was really hard to shake. And for me, it was never about who committed those crimes, but it was who it was committed to. And it was the women and the innocent girls. And we had to speak up. But due to a lot of pressure, we were not able to use any means of government media or other medias to come out and speak to the public and other relevant stakeholders.
Who pressured you?
Government.
The Ethiopian government.
Ethiopian governments that I was serving, of course.
What do you believe justice looks like for the victims of this war?
A cessation of hostility must be reached, but that does not mean we forego seeking justice and accountability for the crimes of human rights violations, especially one's indiscriminate targeting of people and the systematic rape of women and girls from both sides.
Filsan Ahmed, former minister in the federal Ethiopian government, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.